So Walter White became one of the smartest criminal masterminds in TV history, using his intelligence and bald head to build an empire from nothing. But in the real world, he wouldn't be going up against Hank, who, let's be honest, missed some very obvious signs in the show. He'd be facing the entire Drug Enforcement Administration, an organization specifically built to hunt people like him. So today, we're asking a simple question. If Heisenberg was real, would he be able to evade the DEA as long as he did? Or would he be in handcuffs after his first cook? But before we test Heisenberg against the DEA, let's take a look at how he built his empire from raw intelligence. Long before he became Heisenberg, Walt was the kind of chemist who could have changed the world. Back in his younger days, he helped co-found Gray Matter Technologies with Elliot and Gretchen Schwartz. The company went on to make billions, but Walt walked away before it took off. Whether it was pride, insecurity, or resentment, that one decision haunted him for the rest of his life. And years later, when he started cooking meth, he managed to create 99.1% pure blue meth, which was something that no one else was ever able to do. Chemistry became the answer to every problem he faced. When Tuco beat up Jesse and stole the meth, Walt returned to Tuco's office where he detonated a crystal of fulminated mercury just to make a point. It was an awesome scene. Later, when Gus Fring threatened his family, Walt designed a pipe bomb hidden inside Hector Salamanca's wheelchair to take out one of the most careful and calculated men in the drug world. But the more successful he became, the more his pride started to take over.
I won.
He stopped hiding behind his chemistry and started believing no one could touch him. That's where the real DEA would have crushed him, because while Walt was a genius on his own, the DEA operates with entire teams of chemists, analysts, and field agents working together. Every sample of meth that hits the streets is analyzed in forensic labs across the country. Each batch carries a unique chemical fingerprint with a mix of impurities, byproducts, and isotopes that reveal where and how it was made. Real DEA chemists use isotope ratio analysis, a method that can determine where ingredients were produced based on their molecular composition. Lots of big words. But that means that even if Walt tried to change suppliers or cook sites, his product would still carry the same scientific signature. This is the kind of system that has taken down entire meth empires before they even hit full production. In 2018, the DEA used similar forensic tracing to dismantle a multi-state meth network in Oklahoma after linking residue found in a large quantity of sized bulk product in drug manufacturing equipment back to a specific lab. If Walter's 99.1% blue meth ever showed up in the real world, it would immediately stand out in the DEA system and would have been flagged almost instantly. And it doesn't stop there. The agency also monitors precursor chemicals like methylamine and pseudoephedrine, both of which Walter used. In the show's early days, when Jesse couldn't buy methylamine legally, Walt came up with a plan to steal it themselves. The two broke into a chemical warehouse and used a bag of thermite to melt the lock off a secured door before grabbing a barrel of methylamine and escaping. But the break-in didn't go unnoticed. Hank and Gomez later got their hands on the warehouse security footage showing the theft. And while they laughed it off as an amateur job, in the real world, the DEA wouldn't be joking about it. A theft involving a federally tracked chemical like methylamine would immediately trigger a full-scale investigation by the DEA's Diversion Control Division. They would trace the stolen barrel's serial number, pull local purchase records, and review nearby traffic and surveillance footage to identify the suspects. And once they cross-referenced that footage with vehicle sightings near the warehouse, Walt and Jesse wouldn't have lasted long before getting caught. So yeah, the intelligence battle goes to the DEA, but that was just the first round. The real test begins when we look at how Heisenberg ran his operation. When Walt first stepped into the drug world, his operation was just two guys in an old RV cooking meth in the middle of the desert. After their first few cooks, they ran into a major problem. They could make the product, but they had no one to move it. So that's where Tuco Salamanca came in. Yay, Tuco! Walt might have impressed him with blue meth and a bag of fulminated mercury, but Tuco's erratic behavior nearly got them both killed within weeks. No matter how smart Walt was, his entire operation relied on unstable people who could destroy everything in seconds. But as time went on, Walt learned to scale upwards, working under Gustavo Fring, hidden beneath an industrial laundry. Walt handled the chemistry while Gus managed the distributions, money laundering, and border connections. But after Gustavo's death, things changed and Walt was the boss again. He controlled everything personally, the cooks, the deals, the cash, but his distribution was handled through Todd and Lydia. That's where the cracks started to form. In the real world, every middleman, distributor, or even minor associate could be flipped to reveal the network. Todd's carelessness and Lydia's obsession with expanding to Europe would only make the DEA's job easier. In the show, the DEA only ever got close because of Hank's obsession. But in the real world, once Walt's product started moving beyond New Mexico, it would have become a federal case overnight. That's because the DEA runs nationwide task forces that connect evidence from different states. Through the OCDETF program, they would work alongside the FBI, ATF, IRS, and Homeland Security. So if blue meth started appearing in multiple cities, those reports would have been merged into one investigation almost immediately. The DEA also uses undercover agents, informants, and controlled buys to map out entire organizations. They'd find Walt's middlemen, trace the shipments, and follow the money until they reached the source. Walt's empire might have looked untouchable on screen, but in real life, it was just one man trying to outthink an organization, built to monitor every border, every chemical, and every move. The operational battle goes to the DEA as well. But if there's one thing Walt was good at, it was hiding in plain sight. He kept up the act for years, all while deceiving the people closest to him. But could he have pulled the same trick against the eyes of the DEA, though? On the surface, Walt was the overworked chemistry teacher trying to provide for his family, juggling lesson plans, grading papers, and running weekend errands. But behind that mask, he was running one of the most sophisticated meth operations around. For years, he hid the truth from his DEA brother-in-law, carefully navigating conversations and avoiding suspicion. He balanced the role of a devoted husband and father while simultaneously orchestrating murders, managing cooks, and controlling a cash empire. And for a while, his lies held up. It wasn't until Skyler finally learned the truth that cracks started to appear. And even then, Walt managed to keep them mostly under control. Skyler even came up with a story to explain the sudden influx of cash, and he convinced everyone that his sudden wealth came from gambling winnings. Oh, and I almost forgot about Flynn's fundraising website where he set up a GoFundMe for his dad's cancer treatment. Even though Walt resented the idea of asking the public for help, Saul convinced him that it was a perfect way to launder money. Through the website, they started cleaning their cash, hiding thousands in plain sight while maintaining the cover of a desperate family seeking help. In the real world, though, Walt's mask would have failed almost immediately. The DEA uses a combination of informants, phone taps, and undercover surveillance to catch criminals long before they get comfortable. Track financial records, monitor sudden spikes in wealth, and notice behavioral changes. A chemistry teacher suddenly buying a car wash and multiple luxury cars is an instant red flag under the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN, who I've never heard of before. But that's the system used to catch money laundering and illicit gains tied to criminal activity. The agency has a long history of uncovering clean fronts that criminals believed would hide their activities. Take Miami in the 1970s. During the cocaine cowboys era, drug traffickers ran empires behind family-run businesses, laundromats, and other clean fronts, thinking they were untouchable. But the DEA dismantled these networks by using informants, wiretaps, and careful surveillance to track shipments, follow money, and connect the dots. While corruption slowed some investigations back then, modern DEA operations would make Walt's double life impossible to maintain. While Mr. White's deception worked on TV, in the real world, the trail of evidence he left would have made it only a matter of time before the DEA caught up with him. Let's dive into the crime scene mistakes that would have exposed him as well. Let's start with what the DEA would actually look for. In real-life operations, every drug bust, lab raid, and unexplained death triggers a process of collecting samples, photographing scenes, and running lab analysis to find patterns. Even something as small as a boot print near a vehicle or residue on a container can connect multiple crime scenes. And in Walter White's case, the trail is massive. The first major mistake came with Emilio and Crazy 8. Jesse tried disposing of Emilio's body in a bathtub, which melted straight through the ceiling. Blood, acid, and human remains were dripping into the hallway below.
I'm sorry, what were you asking me? Oh, yes. That stupid plastic container I asked you to buy.
In real life, that scene would have been impossible to hide. The smell of decomposing flesh mixed with chemicals fumes would have spread through the neighborhood, forcing someone to call the cops or even the fire department. Once authorities arrived, the DEA's hazardous evidence response team, trained to handle toxic crime scenes, would have taken over. They'd collect samples of the acid, test the remains, and document every trace of the chemical corrosion. Within hours, they'd link the evidence to an unlawful disposal of human remains and open a full homicide investigation, meaning Walt and Jesse would have been caught before their meth business even properly started. Then comes the gas mask incident. When the DEA found it abandoned in the desert, they noticed the school property markings on it and handed it over to Hank, which eventually led him to questioning Walter. But after Walt managed to stay hidden because of family ties, the janitor Hugo, my man, ended up taking the fall. In reality, though, that single piece of equipment would have been a forensic goldmine. The DEA would have dusted it for prints, swabbed it for DNA, and tested the residue inside for chemical traces. Once they confirmed it contained meth byproducts, every person with access to the school's chemistry lab, including Walt, would have been investigated. It's the kind of evidence that, in the real world, wouldn't have let Heisenberg walk away so easily.
Are there any other respirators?
No.
Because I'm counting 6. Inventory says 8.
But Walt's mistakes didn't stop there. The next major scene, which could have blown his cover wide open, was when he forced Jesse to murder Gail Bedecker. A trained chemist found dead in his own apartment would have set off every alarm at the DEA. Fingerprints, gunshot residue, and shell casings would have all been collected, while phone records and surveillance around Gail's building could have placed Jesse nearby. And with his prior connections, Walt would have been pulled into questioning almost instantly. Poor decisions kept piling up when he ran over the 2 dealers who killed Tomas. Even if he intended to save Jesse, it was still a hit-and-run double homicide. DEA field divisions frequently coordinate with local law enforcement to connect violent incidents to ongoing drug cases. So 2 dead street dealers, 1 car matching witness descriptions, and a sudden disappearance of a teacher's vehicle would have been enough to tie everything together.
Run.
On top of that, when Walt later took his car to get it fixed, he lied to the mechanic saying the gunk stunk underneath was from hitting a deer, when it was actually blood and tissue from the dealer. In a real investigation, a mechanic's report combined with forensic testing on the car would have given the DEA a direct link to Walter. We can't go through all of Walt's stupid mistakes here, but if you want a full breakdown of every single time he came dangerously close to being exposed, check out our video dedicated to that. Continuing, imagine if the DEA had picked Walt up for questioning for any of those mistakes. The next challenge would have been surviving their interrogation, and that's exactly what we're diving into in the next level. Level 5, Interrogation versus the DEA. One of Walt's greatest assets was his ability to stay calm under pressure, time and time again. He deflected scrutiny with logic, misdirection, and confidence. When Hank showed him Gail's notebook, Walt quickly claimed the WW was a Walt Whitman poem reference.
To WW, my star, my perfect silence.
These moments made Walt feel untouchable while showcasing his intelligence and skills as a liar. But once you're stuck in an 8x8 room with DEA officers, the game changes completely. The DEA would start with behavioral analysis, where they'd carefully listen and watch for every pause or nervous tick, and test his stories for inconsistencies. Strategic questioning would exploit his pride, fear, or ego to push him towards a slip-up. We all know Walt's ego makes him do stupid things, like the time he told Hank the real Heisenberg is still out there over Gail's death. They wouldn't just confront him with one piece of evidence. Instead, they'd build a case presenting fingerprints, chemical analysis, financial irregularities, and witness statements in a controlled, methodical way. On top of that, if the DEA discovered that Skylar knew about Walt's drug operation, they could have threatened him with her facing prison time. That kind of leverage would have put immense pressure on him, making it pretty likely for Walt to cooperate, potentially giving up Gus, his distributors, or other associates. And this tactic, it ain't just fiction. Back in '94, the DEA broke the Charlestown Code of Silence by flipping insiders in the Irish mob by turning them into key witnesses and securing the indictments of 40 defendants for murder, drug trafficking, and other crimes. Real-life DEA agents are trained to use cumulative evidence, interrogation tactics, and insider testimony. Walt's luck and lies would have faced a whole new level of pressure. The same pride, arrogance, and ego that allowed him to manipulate friends, family, and law enforcement on TV would have been far less effective in the face of a real federal investigation. But even if Walt somehow dodged the heat in that interrogation room, disappearing from the DEA's radar would be another impossible task. Let's take a look on why going on the run as Heisenberg wouldn't be nearly as easy as it looked on TV. Level 6. The disappearance. On TV, Walt managed to vanish into New Hampshire under a fake identity, living off the grid and staying one step ahead of the law. But in reality, staying hidden from the DEA is far more complicated than just changing your name. Every digital footprint you leave, from phone calls and text messages to internet activity and credit card usage, can all be traced. Cell towers can triangulate your location in real time, and GPS-enabled devices leave continuous trails. Cash purchases in public also create patterns that financial analysts can piece together. Combine that with facial recognition software and a fake ID, it only buys a criminal a small window before inconsistencies are flagged. Even high-profile criminals with years of practice, they struggle to stay hidden. Take Whitley Bulger, for example. The Boston mob boss evaded law enforcement for 16 years while living under false identities. But he was eventually caught thanks to a combination of tip-offs, pattern analysis, and facial aging software that detected subtle changes in his appearance over time. Purposely planned his disappearance could be tracked down after 16 years. A man like Walter White, whose face was already famous as Heisenberg, he would have had almost no chance of remaining hidden forever. And while off the grid, Walt's ego pulled him back to people in places that would sink him in a real investigation. He didn't just sit quietly in New Hampshire, he decided to show up at Elliot and Gretchen's crib, the two people who could identify him, name his past, and with one phone call, hand the DEA everything they needed. He also returned to his old house to get the ricin, a move that on TV looks dramatic and suspenseful. But in reality, going back to a former residence is extremely risky. The DEA would have put the house under constant surveillance as soon as Walt became a suspect. Not to mention his visit to Schuyler, which would have also been under surveillance. Cameras, stakeouts, and monitored activity around the property would make it nearly impossible to enter unnoticed, and any attempt to get inside would have been tracked immediately. So, in real life, Walter White probably would have been arrested long before he became Heisenberg. And folks, if you enjoyed this video, please check out our video on every time you felt bad for Jesse Pinkman. It's a banger, I promise you. I will be there, and I hope to see you there as well. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one, and bye-bye!